The moment my mother-in-law's text landed on my phone, I was standing in the laundry room folding towels. Stupid, right? That's what I remember most. The warm towels in my hands, and the way the words on that screen made the whole room feel cold. Just so you know, we're keeping the rehearsal dinner intimate. Family only. Please don't invite your side. I read it 3 times. Then I set my phone, face down on the dryer, and finished folding the towels. All of them. Every single one. Because that's what I do. I keep going. I keep quiet. I keep folding. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that for the past 4 years, I had been quietly writing checks that kept her son's entire future intact. Not metaphorically, literally. Every semester, every textbook, every bar exam prep course. $64,000 over 4 years, moved from my account to his tuition portal like clockwork, without a single dinner conversation about it, without a single thank you card on the refrigerator. My husband Declan knew. That was it. Nobody else in that family had any idea who had actually built the ground they were standing on. I need to take you back 4 years because none of this makes sense without understanding how it started. When Declan and I got married, his younger brother Cole was 19 and completely adrift. He'd gotten into a good law school, actually a great one, the kind with a name that makes his mother go quiet with pride at dinner parties. But the family had hit a rough patch. His father's contracting business had 2 bad years back to back. His mother had taken a part-time position at a dental office just to cover utilities. Cole had the acceptance letter and nowhere near enough money to make it real. Declan told me about it one Sunday morning over coffee. Not as a request, more like he was just saying it out loud, the way you do when something is sitting too heavy. He's going to defer a year and work, Declan said. Maybe 2. By then I don't know if he'll still go. I thought about it for 3 days. Then I looked at what we had. I had been saving aggressively since I was 22, working as a software project manager, living well below my means. And I did the math. We can cover it, I said. All of it. Declan looked at me the way you look at someone when you're not sure they understand what they just said. That's not a small number, he said. I know what the number is, I said. Is he going to make a good lawyer? Declan didn't hesitate. Yeah, he really is. Then we cover it. The condition. The only condition was that we didn't tell his family where the money was coming from. I had my reasons. I didn't want his mother to feel indebted to me. I didn't want it to become a power dynamic at Christmas. I didn't want Cole to feel watched. So we set it up as a private fund, administered quietly, and Cole knew only that Declan had arranged it. He thanked Declan. He hugged Declan. His mother cried and told Declan he was the most generous person she had ever raised. I stood in the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. That was fine. That was genuinely fine with me at the time. The thing about being the invisible one in a family is that you don't notice it happening all at once. It accumulates, like dust. You don't see dust falling. You just look up one day and everything is gray. My mother-in-law, Renata, had a way of making me feel like a guest in rooms I had helped furnish. Not cruelly. That's the thing that made it hard to name. She wasn't mean to me. She was warm to me the way you're warm to someone you're tolerating, graciously. She remembered my birthday. She asked about my job with just enough interest to be polite. But when the family was together, when the real conversations happened, I was always slightly outside the circle. Declan's sister Faye was the same. Not hostile, just indifferent, in a way that had its own particular sting. Cole, to his credit, was always kind to me. Genuinely kind. He brought me coffee without asking at family gatherings. He remembered things I'd mentioned in passing months earlier. When I had a difficult quarter at work and I mentioned it once, briefly, he followed up 2 weeks later and asked how it had resolved. He was going to be a good person, that kid. I was glad we'd done it. But Renata didn't know that we had done anything. As far as she knew, her oldest son had some mysterious money and a very generous spirit. Cole graduated in May, passed the bar in July. By September, he was engaged to a woman named Britannia, which meant the whole family immediately shifted into wedding planning mode, with an intensity I found mildly terrifying. Renata was in her element. She had opinions about everything. Venues, florals, the exact shade of white on the tablecloths. She and Britannia's mother started having weekly calls. There were spreadsheets. There were site visits. There was a group chat that I was technically added to, but that moved so fast and with such insider shorthand that I mostly read it the way you watch a foreign film without subtitles. You get the feeling, not the words. Declan and I offered to help with costs. Renata waved it off the first time, accepted a check for the catering deposit the second time, and never mentioned it again. The rehearsal dinner was being held at a private room in a restaurant I actually loved. I had told Renata that once, in passing, when we'd driven by it together. She had booked it without mentioning that to me. I found out because Brittany mentioned it in the group chat. That was fine. None of it was the thing. The thing came later. The text arrived on a Tuesday. Declan was traveling for work. I was home alone with the dog and the laundry and the very warm towels. Just so you know, we're keeping the rehearsal dinner intimate. Family only. Please don't invite your side. I want to be precise here, because it matters. I had not asked to invite anyone. I had not mentioned my family in the context of the rehearsal dinner. My parents live 4 hours away and they are quiet people who do not insert themselves. The idea that I had been lobbying to bring extra guests had not occurred to me, because I had not been doing that, so the text was not a response to something I'd asked. It was preemptive. It was Renata deciding, on her own, that I needed to be told my family was not welcome at an event I had not asked them to attend. I read it 3 times. I put my phone down. I folded the rest of the towels. Then I typed back 2 words, of course, and I sat with that for about 20 minutes. Then I picked up my phone again and called my financial advisor. I'm not going to pretend I had a clean, calm plan from the beginning. I didn't. What I had in those first hours was something quieter and more honest than a plan. It was clarity. A kind of clarity that comes when something finally says out loud what has always been true. I had been peripheral to this family for 5 years. I had been gracious about it. I had convinced myself that it was fine, that I didn't need to be central, that I was the kind of person who didn't require acknowledgement. And that was true, mostly. I genuinely don't need applause, but there is a difference between not needing applause and being told, without any provocation, that your family is not welcome in the room. That text wasn't about the rehearsal dinner. That text wasn't about the rehearsal dinner. I called my financial advisor and I asked her a question about the account structure we had set up 4 years ago. Then I called the tuition office at Cole's law school, just to confirm that his last payment, bar prep, the previous spring had cleared. It had gone. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and I thought for a long time about what I actually wanted. Not what was fair. Not what would make a point. What I actually wanted. And what I wanted was simple. I wanted them to know. Not for revenge. Because I was tired of being the foundation nobody could see. Declan called that night around 9. I told him about the text. There was a long pause. She sent that, he said, word for word. Another pause. I'm sorry, she shouldn't have done that. No, I said. She shouldn't have. I'll talk to her. I know you will, I said. She shouldn't have. I'll talk to her. I know you will, I said. But I want to tell you something first. I need you to hear me before you do anything. And I told him what I was thinking. Not what I was decided. What I was thinking. Because this was his family, and he deserved to know where my head was before I moved anywhere. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he said, I've let this go on too long. The way they treat you. I've told myself it was just how they are. That's not good enough. I'm not asking you to choose sides, I said. I know, he said. I'm not choosing sides. I'm just saying you're right. That was what I needed to hear, not permission. Just that he saw it too. The rehearsal dinner was on a Friday. The wedding was Saturday. On Wednesday morning, I asked Declan to arrange a dinner with his parents, just the 4 of us, that evening. Renata seemed pleased. She liked one-on-one time with Declan. She chose a restaurant near their house and wore a blazer, which meant she was in good spirits. We ordered drinks. We talked about the weather and the weekend, and whether the florist had confirmed the delivery window. And then, in the middle of all of that, I set my phone face up on the table, and I said, quietly, there's something I want the 2 of you to know before the wedding weekend. Renata looked at Declan. Declan looked at his water glass. His father, a steady man who had always been neutrally kind to me, looked at me directly. Cole's law school, I said. The tuition, All 4 years. Bar prep. That came from me. From my account. It was my money. The silence was, I don't have the right word for it. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just very, very still. Renata said, "What do you mean?" "I mean, Declan told me about the situation when Cole got in," I said. "I did the math. We had the savings. I made the decision. We set it up so it came through quietly because I didn't want it to be complicated. Cole knew Declan had arranged something. He didn't know it was my money." "But Declan," she started. "Declan has always known," I said. "He didn't lie to you. He just didn't correct the assumption." His father put his hand flat on the table, not in anger, more like he was steadying himself. He looked at Declan. Declan nodded once. That was, his father stopped. Started again. "That was an enormous amount of money." "Yes," I said. Renata had gone very still. She was looking at the table. Not at me. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel a certain way," I said. And I meant that. I wasn't performing humility. I genuinely didn't want tears or apologies in a restaurant. I'm telling you, because I've been part of this family for 5 years, and I think you deserve to know who you've actually been part of a family with. I didn't mention the text. I didn't have to. She knew. I watched her know. She excused herself to the restroom after that and was gone for a while. His father and I sat together in the kind of quiet that isn't awkward. It's just full. He told me, without looking up, that he'd had no idea, that he'd always thought. He stopped, and then he said he was sorry, in a simple way that meant he was talking about more than the money. "She doesn't always know how to let people in," he said. Careful with his words. Not excusing her. She's working on it. I think she's about to work on it faster. I nodded. Renata came back to the table and sat down. Her eyes were dry. She'd taken the time she needed. I respected that. She looked at me and said, "I sent you a text this week that was unkind." "You did," I said. "I don't have a good reason for it," she said. She paused. "I've been managing things I don't have the right to manage. I'm sorry." It wasn't a complete accounting. There were 5 years of small things that one dinner conversation was never going to cover. But it was real. I could tell the difference between a real apology and a managed one, and this was real. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. The rehearsal dinner was a quieter affair than I expected. Not uncomfortable, just different. Renata introduced me to Brita's relatives as the person who made a lot of this possible, which was vague enough that most people probably assumed she meant the wedding planning, which was fine. I didn't need the room to know what she meant. Cole found me near the end of the evening, by the coat rack, and he handed me a glass of sparkling water. He said, "My mom called me last night." I looked at him. "She explained," he said. He looked genuinely shaken, the way you look when the ground shifts slightly and you realize it was always softer than you thought. "I've been thanking the wrong person for 4 years. You didn't know," I said. "I should have asked more questions," he said. "Maybe," I said. "But you're going to be a good lawyer because you ask a lot of questions now. So maybe it evens out." He laughed, a little unsteadily. Then he said, "Why didn't you ever say anything?" I thought about it. The honest answer was complicated, and there were about 40 people 10 feet away, and this wasn't the moment for complicated. "I didn't need you to know," I said. "I wanted you to go be good at something, and you did." He nodded. His eyes were bright in a way that he was working to manage. He was going to make an excellent lawyer. "Thank you," he said. "Actually, thank you. Not the Declan version." I laughed at that. The wedding was beautiful. I sat in the second row on the groom's side, next to Declan, which was where I'd always sat at family events, slightly to the side, slightly behind. But this time, when Renata walked past our row to take her seat, she stopped. Just for a second. She put her hand briefly on my shoulder, not a big gesture, not a speech, and then she kept walking. That was it. That was the whole thing. It sounds small. It wasn't small. My parents came to the reception. Renata had called me 2 days before the wedding to ask if they might like to come to the dinner portion. She said she'd have 2 seats added. My mother was pleased. My father wore his good jacket. Nobody made a speech about it. At one point during dinner, I looked down the long table, past Cole and Britton, past Declan laughing with his father. past my mother talking to Faye about something that seemed to be making Faye genuinely smile. And I thought about the version of this night I had imagined after that Tuesday text, the cold version, the one where I had stayed home. I was glad I hadn't taken that version, not because I needed a seat at the table, but because it turned out the seat had always been mine. It just took everyone a little longer to see what had been holding the table up. A few weeks later, Declan and I were having coffee on the back porch when he asked me if I had any regrets about how I'd handled it. I thought about the towels, the Tuesday text, the phone call to my financial advisor, the restaurant, and the silence, and Renata's dry eyes when she came back from the restroom. "No," I said. "Do you?" "I regret letting it go as long as I did," he said. "That part's on me." "Yeah," I said. "A little bit." He looked at me. "But you're not late," I said. "A little bit." He looked at me. "But you're not late," I said. "You showed up." He put his coffee down and didn't say anything for a while. The dog was asleep in a square of sunlight on the porch. The neighbors were mowing somewhere. Everything was ordinary in the way that feels extraordinary when you've been holding something heavy for a long time and you're finally not. I didn't need them to have always seen me. I just needed them to look now, and they were looking. That was enough. That was actually, genuinely, enough. I thought a lot about the Tuesday the text arrived, the warm towels, the cold screen. The two words I typed back. People ask me sometimes, when I tell this story, whether I was angry, and the honest answer is, not in the way you'd expect. There was no fire. It was more like something finally clicked into place, like a door that had been slightly off its hinge for years just quietly finally closed. Here's what I've come to understand. The way other people treat you is almost never really about you. Renata didn't dismiss me because I had done something wrong. She dismissed me because she had never been asked to see me clearly, and I had never insisted on it. I had been so careful not to make things complicated, so committed to keeping the peace, that I had accidentally taught everyone around me that my presence didn't require much. That was on me as much as it was on them. That's the part nobody talks about in these stories. It's easy to say someone treated you badly. It's harder to ask yourself what you allowed, and for how long, and why. I allowed it because I told myself I was above needing acknowledgement. But there's a difference between not needing applause and making yourself invisible. One is strength. The other is just a quieter kind of shrinking. I had confused the two for a long time. What I did, telling them the truth at that dinner, calmly, without drama, without ultimatums, wasn't revenge. I want to be precise about that. It wasn't even a power move, not really. It was just an unwillingness to keep being unknown. I had done something real. I had built something that mattered, and I had let 4 years pass without anyone understanding what had actually happened. That wasn't humility. That was erasure, and I had been participating in it. The thing about quiet, consistent effort is that it compounds. Cole became a lawyer. That happened. That was real, and it was permanent regardless of whether anyone ever connected it to me. But I also think there's something in us that needs to be witnessed, not celebrated, not thanked effusively, just seen, accurately, without distortion. And when we go too long without that, something starts to hollow out. Declan said afterward that he regretted letting it go as long as he had. I told him he wasn't late. That was true. But it also cost something. Those years of being slightly outside the circle, slightly behind the glass. I don't think you get those back. I think you just stop adding more of them. What I want, if you're carrying something similar, some long and quiet contribution that nobody has named, some room you've been standing in the doorway of while everyone else sat down, is for you to consider that your presence is not a request that requires their approval. You don't have to announce yourself loudly, but you also don't have to fold yourself up to fit into the space they've decided to leave for you. There's a version of this story where I stayed home from that wedding, where I stayed quiet, stayed peripheral, stayed small. I'm glad that version doesn't exist. The seat was always mine. I just finally sat down in it.